Hey there, and welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, getting ready to go over the two-game NBA slate for Saturday. This is about to kick off fairly soon, so let's get it out of the way. Obviously, the goal is to help you win. If anything I do here helps you out, smash the like button. Also, subscribe to the channel. We got NBA Cup games going on. We got Bucks hosting the Hawks, and then Thunder against the Astros, the Rockets. So both really good games. The game to stack, if you're going to stack one, would be the Bucks and Hawks game. It has two pretty fast-paced teams and two teams that can be had defensively. Whereas Houston and OKC are much better defensively. OKC specifically, they're looking like basically the best team in the league right now, short of Boston. And Milwaukee is favored at home in a game with a 232.5 total, and OKC is favored at home with a 216 total, and they are favored by 6. So I would definitely lean into the Hawks-Bucks game a lot, and I don't think I'd worry about ownership too much. It's just certainly the better game to be a part of. Both games are projected to be close too, so I wouldn't read into that too much. That said, I still want just the best plays, and I want the best value. So let's go position by position and see who those are on the slate. So starting up top, SGA with a 49-point fantasy projection looks really, really good at 10.2K. His price continues not to move at all, and he's not very owned. So if you want to get different and get a similar projection with a higher ceiling than the likes of Trae Young and Damian Lillard, I have no issue with that whatsoever. The only problem is Trae Young looks amazing at 9.3K, so I think he is a better play than SGA. And obviously, he has the better matchup going up against the Bucks as well. He's going to be double the ownership of SGA, so that is the only negative there. Although Trae looks good, and you can still use SGA. I much prefer Damian Lillard if I'm only playing one of these high-end point guards. He's only 8.8K. Projects for more minutes, has a similar overall fantasy projection, and he has the best matchup on the board against the Hawks. So he's just in the best game environment, and I also think he's going to be interesting leverage on Giannis if you do not want to pay up for Giannis, because he is kind of expensive for a two-game slate. And I think in the matchup with the Hawks, he's been okay. 53 fantasy points the last time he faced them. I have mentioned this before going into a Bucks Hawks game, that the Hawks are top 10 as far as preventing teams scoring down low. So with Clint Capella there, it's not exactly the easiest interior matchup that you would preferably have when you're paying for somebody as expensive as Giannis. Doesn't mean you can't play Giannis, especially on a two-game slate. Very scary to fade Giannis. But Dame looks really, really good. You can stack him with Giannis if you want to. You can try to pair him with Trae to get another stack element in that game, or you could just leverage and play him over Giannis. Of course, you can go on the flip side too, because Lillard's pulling the most ownership of any expensive point guard on this slate, and you could fade him and just hope it's a big-time Giannis game and maybe look at some ancillary Bucks pieces. Fred VanVleet at 7.1K, he's going to play big minutes. They're going to need him to cover SGA. Obviously, Fred VanVleet failed as a chalky good option against the Warriors on a two-game slate a few days ago. He only had 20 fantasy points in that game. It's another tough spot. The OKC is one of the best defensive teams in the league. So the price is good. The projection's good. Everything looks pretty good. And the ownership at 23% isn't even crazy. So I do not mind going back to the well here. We can't let recency bias dictate what we're going to do. So if you can get to Fred VanVleet, I think he is a solid play on this slate. Certainly, though, in terms of floor and upside, he ranks fourth among all the top spends over 7K. There really isn't anybody else to spend up for after that, though, I will say. So we're looking at interesting values. There's two of them. AJ Green is still getting minutes, even with Chris Middleton back, 25 to 30 minutes. I think he played 31 in his last game. Not a good per minute guy, but if he's only 3.5K and we can hope for 25 minutes against the Hawks, I like that a lot, actually, for value. Just don't expect a massive ceiling. It just isn't there. Kason Wallace at 3.9K, still getting minutes, even with Alex Caruso back. On a regular slate, would I really want to play AJ Green or Kason Wallace? No, I wouldn't, but they're both under 4K. They're both projected for 25 to 30 minutes. So they both look good. I think Kason Wallace is certainly the safer play, but if you look at ownership, he's projected to be crazy owned at 57%, whereas AJ Green is kind of going ignored. So I think in tournaments, AJ Green is a nice little pivot there, but Kason Wallace remains in play for sure. All right, over at shooting guard, Jalen Green leads a very, very bad position. He's 6.4K. He's coming in with a 29.49 fantasy projection and roto grinders. Not even crazy ownership, all things considered. He does have a nice ceiling. But usually that is going to be the case when there's nobody else there, like when Fred VanVleet or somebody are out. Last game against Warriors, only 25 fantasy points. In two games against the Thunder, only 19.5 fantasy points per game. It's pretty gross. So I don't think I need to go out of my way to spend at shooting guard if Jalen Green is the best option. Hey, if he goes off, then so be it. I lose because I didn't play Jalen Green, right? So the story is pretty similar to Tyson Daniels. But I do think Dyson Daniels is a little more interesting. He's only $200 more. He's going to play more minutes. He does more than just score. Like Jalen Green is very scoring dependent. If Jalen Green comes out there and does not score 20 plus real points, he's going to bust. If Dyson Daniels comes out and doesn't score 20 plus real points, he can still get there with steals and blocks and rebounds and assists. So, and he can hit threes too. So, on top of that, he's got the way better matchup against the Bucks and just a better overall game environment. So if you're going to pay up at shooting guard, Dyson Daniels is the play. And the nice thing is he's not even really owned. I'm really happy to see Chris Middleton carrying ownership. About 31% here. It's kind of gross considering he is still limited. Let's actually check his minutes. Well, first of all, he's probable to play, so he should play. It is a meaningful game, but he's capped at 23 minutes so far. His first 3 games back from injury, that's the most we've seen him play. He's only played 20 and 20 in the last 2 games. And one of those, I think at least, one of them was a cup game too. So I don't know. It's possible he gets extended run. And of course, a matchup with the Hawks is very favorable, so there's nothing wrong with that at all. And 5.3 isn't going to break the bank. But if we cannot have any faith in Middleton playing 25 plus minutes, I think that's a good fade on this slate. Amen Thompson at 5.7K, a little bit pricey for me with everybody there for Houston. If somebody was out for the Rockets, I think Dylan Brooks is questionable. If Dylan Brooks is out, Amen Thompson looks pretty darn good at 5.7. If Dylan Brooks is in, I don't think he's shooting guard eligible. It might just be small forward. We'll talk about him in a second. But anyways, I like Dylan Brooks if he's in. Bogdanovich at 4.6 might be one of my favorite values of the slate. Certainly one of my favorite shooting guard plays. Honestly, dollar for dollar, I think he is my favorite shooting guard play. He's a little bit more expensive than Kason Wallace, and he's coming at half the ownership. So sign me up for that all day. Lou Dort at 4.4. The minutes are good and the price is good. The only problem is Alex Caruso does exist. Alex Caruso is back. So that does cut into Dort's minutes safety a little bit. I think they're both good plays. I think I would just play the ownership there. Right now, Lou Dort is carrying way more ownership and he's $600 more. So I do think I would go Alex Caruso there just because Dort he's like Jalen Green times 100. If he's not hitting shots, he's probably going to bust. You could consider Gary Trent, especially if you're already looking at AJ Green. Similar minutes, similar projection, and similar ownership. I don't know if you can really trust either of them very confidently, but they both are in play on a 2-game slate. Let's see who else is here. That's it for shooting guard. Let's move on to small forward. DeAndre Hunter looks pretty darn good at 5.6K. He comes in with the best fantasy projection at the position, and he's not even that owned. Definitely, if you're thinking about Chris Middleton at 5.3K at small forward, pivot to Hunter. I like him way, way better. Same goes for Amen Thompson, who is eligible at small forward as well. I don't like him as much if Dylan Brooks is in. If Dylan Brooks is out, Amen Thompson looks pretty good at 5.7. I much prefer Tari Eason right now over Amen Thompson. $700 cheaper. You can use him at small forward or power forward. He did not work out last time, but we know he's a really good permanent guy and he gets pretty good usage off the bench. So I think he's a really good value. Have no issue going there. Definitely would rather pay for him $600 more for him over Lou Dort. And at this point, I kind of just want to play him and, Bogdanovich together instead of going for Dort and Amen Thompson or Middleton. Dylan Brooks' price has actually come down, only 4.2K. They are going to need him on the outside to help slow down SGA. So projecting for 34 minutes, it's not a good spot at all. And, if he doesn't hit some shots, he's probably going to have a tough time getting there. But the minutes are what I'm looking at with Dylan Brooks, especially at that price. I have no issue taking on the risk there and just hoping that he can hit some shots. I already mentioned Caruso. I definitely prefer Caruso over Gary Trent. Reza Shear for the Hawks. It's just, you never know what his role is going to be. I guess I would keep an eye on the other Hawks guys. I think a couple of them are questionable. Let me just see. Yeah, Jalen Johnson is questionable. I don't think he misses because it's a big game for them. Hunter himself is probable, and Bogdanovich is probable. So odds are we're not going to see a big impact or major shift there. So at 4K flat, I think if he's going to get 20 plus minutes and a plus matchup, I think he's an okay value, just not really a priority for me. Nobody else really stands out. Taurean Prince with 20 minutes, I think you can try, but boy, he did nothing the last time. So always a risky play for sure. All right, over at power forward, Giannis looks the best with the 61-point fantasy projection. He is 11.2K, but he's got the best matchup on the board. He's going to be very, very owned. I think you can certainly entertain if you're doing a lot of lineups. I mean, I wouldn't on a 2-game slate, but if you're going to, you could certainly entertain on being underweight on him and hoping a more balanced build is the way to go on the slate. Because as far as studs go, it's really him and SGA as far as like high end floor. Like Trey and Dame are really, really good on this slate, and they're nicely priced, but they're super volatile plays. Whereas SGA and Giannis are probably a good bet to get 50 fantasy points, and they both have a considerably high ceiling. Just like last time, I really like Jalen Johnson. Big minutes, nice price at 8.2K. Good matchup against the Bucks. If you don't want to play Giannis, you can save $3,000 and go get Jalen Johnson at 8.2K. He is questionable though, so just keep an eye on his status. Certainly, you can play him with Giannis too if you don't want to go pair Dame with Giannis. That does make a lot of sense as far as correlation and ceiling goes. So there's that. But he looks really good. I have no problem with him whatsoever. I would definitely play him over Jalen Williams. I will say Jalen Williams is $400 more, comes in with a slightly lower projection. The nice thing about Jalen Williams, still has a massive role with no Chet Holmgren. He does project pretty well, and he's not going to be owned compared to Jalen Johnson. So if Jalen Johnson's really going to be 50% owned, you certainly can consider pivoting to Jalen Williams, who's coming in about 14%. Bobby Portis has been on fire lately, so I really like Bobby Portis at 5.5K. Really good matchup off the bench, good usage off the bench. Should play 27 to 30 minutes if he's hitting his shots. And against the Hawks, I don't see why he wouldn't be. And honestly, the price is still good. So he's going to be chalky, but I do not mind eating that chalk. If you don't want to eat a chalky Bobby Portis, you can pivot to DeAndre Hunter. There's also Jabari Smith, and there's Tari Eason. All three of those guys I like. If I had to pick one, I think it's going to be Tari Eason just because he's getting a lot of that usage off the bench, and he's cheaper than all those guys. None of those other guys really called to me as far as punts down here. Aaron Wiggins, Kendrick Williams, Tarian Prince I already mentioned. Not feeling them that much. I think the guard value looks a lot better than the power forward value. All right, lastly, Giannis at center. You can use him there too. Obviously, looks great. Şengün is another argument for not paying for Giannis on the slate because Şengün has really nice upside, a good projection. His price has actually come down. The matchup with OKC is not friendly, but he's not going to be mega owned, so there is that. I would certainly prefer him to be a little bit cheaper, but I think he's totally in play, especially if you do not plan on playing Antetokounmpo. There's Isaiah Hartenstein. His price has come down. He's got to face Şengün, so it's not really the perfect spot. But again, he's even less owned than Şengün. And honestly, at 7K, based off of who he's been lately, he's one of the better mid-range values of the entire slate. So it just depends on where you want to go on the slate. If you're paying for Giannis, it's going to be kind of hard to get there. But he's certainly in play, and he looks like an interesting tournament option, considering he's half the ownership of guys like Bobby Portis and Giannis. Obviously, Bobby Portis, you can use him at center too if you'd like. Clint Capella is there at 5.4K. He is a pivot off of Portis for sure, coming in at half the ownership, and he still has a similar projection. I think I prefer Bobby's minutes and ceiling. But Capella is going to be out there, 25, maybe even 30 minutes in a pretty big game for the Hawks. So I do not hate him at all. I think I prefer Okongwu, though, at 4.3K. You save 1.1K in salary, and you're getting basically the same amount of minutes, basically the same projection. I just think he's the better play. You can pair them together. I just don't think I would do that. Jabari Smith, I already mentioned, he's okay. Love the minutes, love the price. The actual raw points projection doesn't look that appealing. And I probably prefer Tari Eason when you compare the two. Brook Lopez at 5.1K, good minutes. He'll start. If he can get hot and hit some threes, Splash Mountain could definitely break the slate. I think he's an interesting play for sure. Given the impact Bobby Portis has had, Portis's presence in ownership is a little concerning if you're looking at Brook, but Brook is really interesting leverage on Bobby Portis because he's cheaper. He's still going to get more minutes than Bobby probably, and he could certainly exploit this matchup. So I think that is another thing we should consider for rolling out a lot of lineups. We can leverage the Bobby Portis ownership possibly and hope for a big game out of Brook, who's not owned at all on this slate. All right, nobody else really pops. Kendrick Williams, Steven Adams, that's a big no thank you. It is a 2-game slate, so you can kind of do whatever you want. I think right now, if I'm entering a lot of lineups, I'm definitely going a little bit away from Giannis. He's the best projecting player on the slate, so that could be a huge mistake. But there's so many good mid-range guys here and like top-level guys. If you don't pay 11.2K for Giannis, you can go get Trey, Dame, Şengün, Jalen, and or either Jalen you want and maybe even Hartenstein or Fred VanVleet. And I don't see how that's not a bad strategy at all. So it all depends on what you want to do with Giannis. My personal strategy is probably going to be going a little bit away from Giannis for that reason. And then also just try to find, logical pivots. Like I like Bobby Portis in a vacuum. I would still play him in a lot of my lineups, but if he's going to be 50% owned, why not bet on Bobby Portis not showing up in this game and pivoting just and leveraging with somebody like Brooke Lopez or just somebody in that same price range, whether it be Clint Capella or Jabari Smith or DeAndre Hunter. Just find somebody else who projects kind of similarly or has a similar salary that just could smash and be way less owned than Bobby is. All right, that is going to do it for me. Hopefully this helps you out a little bit. It is a 2-game slate. It's the NBA Cup, so it's volatile in general. So I would suggest playing lightly, but hopefully it helps. And if it does, smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.